Good evening, everyone. Buenas noches a todos y a todas. So glad to see all of you here. I want to show actually real quick if you can go to the Mentimeter. We're going to try something interesting tonight. So this is not happening right now, but this is the time for everyone to take out their cell phones. And if you want to try to scan that code, it's by any chance you don't have Wi-Fi and you cannot make it work, don't worry. For those of you, we're going to be asking you a question at one point, and whatever shows up in your phone right now, it's going to allow you to answer that question. Again, if you're not able to make it work, it's perfectly fine. Trying things different every single time, let there always be fun. All right, so full house tonight. Very excited. It is really a pleasure to welcome you all tonight here. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Ana Carrion. I'm the Chief Development Officer at Naturaleza, and I am truly thrilled to have you here tonight and really to see this place completely packed. I want to begin by expressing my gratitude to each and every one of you for joining us, and especially here at the Roosevelt House of New York City. This historic landmark once was the home of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt, and if you haven't gone to the self-guided tour, please do. It was where pivotal discussions on social justice, human rights, and advocacy took place. It's a fitting location for tonight's conversation as we carry forward that same spirit of dialogue and action in our efforts to protect Puerto Rico's natural and historic heritage and address the urgent environmental challenges of our time. Tonight's conversation is not only timely, but it's incredibly important. The challenges we face in conserving our ecosystems require thoughtful dialogue and collaboration, and I'm confident that tonight's discussion will inspire all of us to take further action. So with that said, I want to take a few seconds to say thank you to our event committee. Those of you who are in event committee, if you can stand up for a second. Don't be shy. Salome, Tonio, Bea. Very shy, all of them. But anyway, thank you to all of them. And I also have to say that I'm honored to have with us Carmen Baez, who is the chair of the Naturaleza board over here. Salome Galib, who is a dedicated, long-standing member of the Naturaleza advisory board. And Brenda, who you will hear a lot from soon, so I will introduce her in a little bit. Now, again, maybe some of you learned tonight that the Roosevelt House has been beautifully restored and maintained by Hunter College of the City University of New York. So I cannot go without mentioning that tonight we have with us the CUNY Chancellor, Felix Matos Rodriguez, and his wife, Dr. Liliana Aravia. Both proud Puerto Ricans and good friends. Additionally, I'd like to recognize John King, the Chancellor of the State University of New York and former U.S. Secretary of Education, who is with us tonight. Thank you for your commitment to education and for your support of our mission. And again, thank you all for your ongoing leadership and education. I know there are many special people in tonight. I cannot name all of you by name, but thank you from the bottom of my heart. So, I have to take 2 seconds on a personal note. And Fernando, if you allow me to do this. But I can go without acknowledging one very important person in the audience tonight, my husband, Jorge Silva Puras. And I think some of our kids might be here tonight. And I am recognizing him because today we celebrate 15 years of marriage. Adding classic Jorge style, for those of you who know my husband, when I told him we might have to have a larger celebration with 100 of my closest friends, he simply said, sí, mi amor, which are key words to a successful marriage. And he would say, el que sabe, sabe. So anyway, happy anniversary to my husband, wherever he is in the audience. But now, back to the event. Let's welcome our distinguished guests and get on with it. Abimari Otaño Cruz. She serves as the Environmental Defense Fund Senior Manager of Energy Transition in Puerto Rico. Abimari engages with the Culebra Island community to support the sustainability of a residential rooftop solar and battery storage project. She leads education and outreach initiatives to enhance the accessibility of clean, affordable, and reliable electricity for communities, while also supporting climate resilience and coastal adaptation efforts. With a background in environmental science, marine conservation, and coral reef restoration, Abimari has been involved in research on coral sedimentation and conservation efforts for Culebra's protected areas. She holds a bachelor's and master's degree in environmental science from the University of Puerto Rico. Welcome, Abimari. Brenda Torres, and some of you might have read all of these bios, but just give me a few minutes. It's an accomplished sustainability professional with extensive experience in environmental management, corporate social responsibility, and public policy development through empowerment and multi-sectoral collaborations. She has held leadership roles in both Puerto Rico and the United States and is a lead accredited expert in green building development. Brenda holds a bachelor's in environmental science from the University of Puerto Rico and a master's in environmental management from Yale University. She has worked and has advised Governor Andrew Cuomo in the past as part of the New York Secretary of Environment team, directed Puerto Rico Office of Federal Affairs, as PRAFA as we know it, and served as executive director of a major Audubon Society chapter in California. I'm going to go now into Dr. Isatis Cintron Rodriguez. So welcome, Brenda. Isatis is a Puerto Rican climate scientist and activist, bridging the gap between policy, science, and community engagement. She is the climate justice postdoctoral research scientist at Columbia University Climate School. She obtained her doctorate in environmental science from Rutgers University. And give me a second here. Apologize about that. My computer is acting up as I'm reading all of this. Here we go. She currently leads the ACE Observatory and its subsidiary Climate Trace Puerto Rico, focusing on participatory climate governance and community-led adaptation strategies. Dr. Cintron Rodriguez work spans the Latin America and Caribbean region and expanding the civil space and human rights approaches at the United Nations. So welcome, Isatis. And Fernando Lloveras San Miguel, president of Para Naturaleza, he has dedicated his career to environmental conservation and public service. He began his professional journey as a public policy advisor to the governor of Puerto Rico, and before founding microjuris.com, an innovative legal information service where he served as president and chairman. And in 2003, as I mentioned, he became the executive director of the Puerto Rico Conservation Trust, leading significant transformations in nature conservation and citizen engagement. Under his presidency, Para la Naturaleza was established, managing over 39,000 acres of land, protected land, and achieving accreditation from the Land Trust Alliance. Fernando chairs the IUCN Caribbean Regional Council and has held leadership roles on several boards, including the Land Trust Alliance and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. He has a bachelor's in economics and geography from Dartmouth College, a master's in public policy from Harvard University, and a Juris Doctor from the University of Puerto Rico. So welcome, Fernando. And finally, now it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for the evening, Luis Ferrez Adorni. He's born and raised in Puerto Rico. He graduated from the University of Pennsylvania and joined the New York Times in 2017 as a James Reston Reporting Fellow before being promoted to Albany Bureau Chief. And now Luis covers the influx of immigrants arriving in the New York region. Notably, he spent 40 days reporting from Puerto Rico in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, Irma and Maria, offering first-hand accounts of the devastation. Luis, we are thrilled to have you guide this conversation tonight. Thank you, and I now leave you in his capable hands. Thank you all for your support and enjoy the evening.
Thank you for joining us and for being here. And thank you, para la Naturaleza, for organizing this event to continue strengthening the connections between Puerto Ricans in New York and Puerto Ricans at home who share the same mission of building a sustainable future for our island. Puerto Rico has a very small carbon footprint compared to the rest of the world. Yet, we've seen how the island is at the forefront of the devastating effects of climate change. We've seen an increase in the average annual temperatures on the island, which has led to more heat waves and less rain. We've seen a higher frequency of droughts, affecting the island's aquifers and agriculture industry. We know the effects on our biodiversity and our treasured native species, including the coquilles and murciélagos. We know the effects that coastal erosion has on our beaches, seaside communities, and even the tourism industry. And we've seen, of course, how rising temperatures have warmed the oceans and led to a higher frequency of devastating extreme weather events, especially hurricanes. In 2017, we had Maria, which led to the loss of thousands of Puerto Rican lives, the most severe power outage in U.S. history, and billions of dollars in damages. A few years ago, we had Fiona in 2022, which led to severe flooding, torrential rains, mudslides. So there's a much at stake and a lot to do to implement all the mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency efforts that are needed. Take one example. Puerto Rico in 2019 passed a law establishing the goal of reaching 100% renewable energies by 2050. By next year, in theory, we're supposed to get to 40%, but today we're at 4 to 7% of renewable energies, mostly from solar and wind. And let's not forget about the human toll of climate change. Our island's people are especially vulnerable. 32% of our population has at least one chronic disease, which makes them even more vulnerable to higher temperatures and power outages. 43% live in poverty, and 61% of our population is over 60. 61% of our population lives in coastal municipalities that are vulnerable to rising sea levels. Also all these challenges sound daunting, and frankly they are. But we hope that the conversation today will go beyond just protecting ourselves and building resiliency, but also elevating the importance of addressing the efforts to combat climate change and reverse some of the damage that we've had. And the first step towards doing that in Puerto Rico and beyond is by learning more about the issue and truly understanding it. And that's what we hope to do here today with our panelists, who I have to say are much smarter than I am on this topic. So I'm going to be learning a little bit here as well. And we'll begin first by exploring the challenges that Puerto Rico is facing as it relates to climate change. We'll then drill down on specific case studies and success stories of what different stakeholders are doing on the island. And then we'll finish off, hopefully on an optimistic note, exploring the way forward. Yeah, I dampened the mood earlier. Exploring the way forward and how you all can get involved. And I think we're first going to test out the QR code Ana Mar mentioned earlier. And we have a question for the audience. um, which is what word comes to mind when we say climate change? And you guys can input your answers and we can get a pulse from the audience. And hopefully it works. Yeah. Oh, some are coming up. Calor. Bueno, so there we have an idea of what we associate climate change specifically in general, but I guess there's also some references to Puerto Rico there as well. To get us started, sort of understanding the state of play, I think it would be important to zoom out a little bit and talk about Puerto Rico in the context of the Caribbean region. And Fernando, could you talk to us about the most pressing challenge that so many different island nations and territories in the Caribbean face in organizing against the same common global threat?
Sure. Thank you, and good night to everybody. Let's put it into the Caribbean context first a bit, just to zoom in later into Puerto Rico. For many of us, I mean, we can see the Caribbean as a tourism destination, but it's actually one of the world's most biodiverse areas in the world. It's actually one of the hotspots declared by WWF. So and as you know, the islands has much more endemism, which means that the evolutionary process of species in islands is greater. So we have a lot of endemism and biodiversity throughout the whole Caribbean. Just to give you an example, over 11,000 species of plants, and about 73% are endemic. And if you go to reptiles and other areas, it's even higher, the endemism. So we're really talking about a great and diverse life area in the world. Also, the Caribbean brings a connectivity, an important corridor between North and South America. There are two corridors, the land corridor in Central America, and then the more water island corridor in the Caribbean. So it's an important connectivity for species to migrate, and bird species and water and sea species migration area. And as a matter of fact, I was in Samaná earlier this year just to watch the humpback whales. And I saw hundreds of humpback whales taking care of their babies there, which was really impressive. How all the species use these areas to actually nurture their babies, and then from there keep going through the north and south of the Americas. So it's quite impressive the amount of biodiversity that we have. So I just want to put that so that we start thinking of the Caribbean as a very highly biodiverse area. There's also an important factor here in terms of the colonial period that really marks a lot of the differences and importance of the Caribbean. Very early on, the colonial period dissected the Caribbean region in a lot of different pieces. So what was once an ecological country is now divided into many metropolises. So this is a human impact that we can see it, in a negative or positive side. But at the end of the day, it has become an important human biodiversity for all of us. So if you go to the Caribbean, you can see an incredible diverse culture, food, music, and so forth. So we have, I think, a great asset out of this devastating colonial period. And as a matter of fact, half of the islands in the Caribbean are still territorial relations, have territorial relations to their metropolis. So there's still a lot to go in terms of the governance of the Caribbean. So all of these really brings a lot of opportunities for the Caribbean, but a lot of challenges as well. I mean, the Caribbean, this dissection of the Caribbean brings a lot of problems in terms of communication, because different languages, of transportation, because the cost of transportation of going from one island to the other is probably much higher than coming from those islands to New York or other big cities. So it's really hard for us to relate to each other in terms of the logistics of what's going on. And all of these also brings, it comes with a lot of issues relating to the risk of climate change to the Caribbean, because we're not only in the hurricane alley, where most of these hurricanes have a constant route, but we're suffering a lot of the sea level rise, which islands throughout the world are suffering much more and are losing much more land. And as Luis mentioned, a lot of the infrastructure, human infrastructure, are in the coast. So it's a very high vulnerability of the human population and human, hospitals and power plants. Most of them are in the coast. So there's a very high vulnerability of the human, and we lived in and suffered during Maria. I mean, it was. So there's also, we're losing a lot of coral reefs, which is one of the main protectors and main sea forests for biodiversity. So that is dying off quite significantly. So these challenges come up also with coastal erosion and the heat waves. Came out clearly there that we've had amazing heat waves in the last 3 months in Puerto Rico, and the vulnerability of that for the populations that have some health conditions is quite large. So all these threats are part of I think the overburden of the Caribbean region in terms of the climate change. I think we're more exposed, and we are suffering more the damages. And obviously, there were 2 hurricanes here recently, so you know what that means. But when you're in an island with difficulties in transportation, it really becomes much worse. So in terms of Puerto Rico, I'll cover a little bit in the next round, but Puerto Rico serves as an incredible bridge between the Lesser Antilles and the bigger Antilles. So Puerto Rico has a great opportunity to be of help to this region, and we're actually doing that through the IUCN, International Union for the Conservation of Nature. This is a global organization that basically groups most of the world conservation organizations or NGOs. And we have the Caribbean Regional Committee is about 20 members, so we're not that many, but we're working very closely together because, at our level, if a hurricane comes, if sargassum seagrass comes and floods our beaches, we're pretty much on our own because we don't have any support, we don't have any coordination that we can support. Like here, I was in Montreal, right before the hurricanes, and I saw 50 electric trucks coming down to help on the hurricanes. Well, we don't have that. So we need to strengthen the Caribbean unity and support in order to be able to be a bit more effective. Thank you.
So in terms of hurricanes, I think what stands out most to people is how it's laid bare the weaknesses in our infrastructure. Speaking specifically about Puerto Rico, obviously what comes to mind is our outdated power grid, which is in the midst of a transformation right now. But what are other sort of glaring infrastructure weaknesses that have been exposed and remain vulnerable, Abimari?
Yes, thanks for the question and for the introduction, Fernando. 7 years has passed since Hurricane Irma and Maria. We remember that like it happened yesterday, right? And this event brought out what we already knew. The electric grid of Puerto Rico is outdated and it needs immediate restoration and transformation of its own organization, right? It's a centralized grid, and a lot of things needs to happen, right? So the most important thing is how we got this traumatic experience, and it helped the international world, like everyone, to understand the interconnectivity in this in small islands between the electric grid, electricity, and all other basic needs like food, health, medicine, education, internet connectivity, conservation efforts, biodiversity. Everything is interconnected, and we depend on electric service to be reliable, clean, and also all the other basic needs. Also, we need all of that. So it's basically all the infrastructure it is needed in Culebra, in Puerto Rico, I mean, and in Culebra also. Going a little bit more into Culebra is going to be the focus of my conversation and everything I mentioned today here because of the focus of the work of Environmental Defense Fund in Puerto Rico, but as in overall and throughout the archipelago, we really need this transformation to happen to avoid another humanitarian crisis. That's really important, and yeah, we can see in Culebra an example how we can make it happen. I think moving forward we can go into details on those things.
Absolutely. And in recent years, there's also been a very heated debate on the island around our coastlines and construction and erosion along our beaches, which many of us consider one of our most precious resources. I think, Brenda, you could talk to us a little bit about the current state of the coastlines and waterways in Puerto Rico. Why is it so important to protect the island's coasts and its marine biodiversity, right? And what are the current vulnerabilities we're seeing there?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm currently managing a nonprofit organization that does water quality restoration through informing about the critical hotspots in the metropolitan region to the Puerto Rico Aqueduct Sewer Authority and the municipalities that are part of this estuarine watershed that I'm managing. And so through that work, I've been able to evaluate the situation, what's happening, who's responsible, and the impacts of that to our coastal regions. So my studies has been primarily in this metropolitan region, which is a pretty important area for all of the Puerto Ricans, from the cultural side to the economic side as well. So I consider the coastal regions in a critical state and a state of emergency. Actually, it was declared like that by the governor of Puerto Rico last year. And after that, we were hoping to see a lot of actions in response to that, a lot of investments and priorities being put in that area. We haven't, so we still remain in a very vulnerable state. I responsibilize primarily the lack of investment in an infrastructure that is resilient, investment in our road infrastructure, as well as the water infrastructure. And when I say water infrastructure, I mean primarily the storm runoff or stormwater sewer, as well as the sanitary infrastructure. All of that, even though we're talking about infrastructure, gray infrastructure, that is, in a way, we're sort of talking about the coastal regions as well, because everything we do upland has an impact in the waters in our coastal regions. So unfortunately, that is the situation, and through our work, we've been able to detect specific point sources of pollutions, areas that were considered like sort of an overwhelming state that we don't know where to begin. Non-point sources, we know exactly where those responsibles are and where that is coming from. And I think it's important. Sometimes you feel like my work is more of like conservation and protecting the sea turtles and everything, but it's really, we have to work also with those that are managing the infrastructure in Puerto Rico.
And Isatis, when looking at how to respond to all these challenges that have been laid out so far, and there are many more, from land conservation to coastal and biodiversity protection to reinforcing our infrastructure, what sort of long-term plan, if any, as of now, is in place from the island's government's perspective?
Thank you so much for the invitation to be here and the question. So I guess we should start that Puerto Rico has very strong laws on environment, right? Like we have on our constitution is even the right to access to beaches, and that's why you will hear everyone saying las playas son del pueblo, so the beaches are of the people. So there is this understanding on connecting the environment, and our problem is in enforcement. We have a lot of declarations that there's a lot of expectation that things are happening, but at the end, nothing happens. And then in terms of plan, right, in my organization, we work at the international level, both with Latin America and small island developing states, in both tracking what they're doing, but also providing technical support. So in terms of the Paris Agreement, right, countries have to provide a climate strategy. Puerto Rico, for obvious reason, and its colonial state, is removed from this conversation. So it's a shame that at the moment, right, 7 years of Maria, we don't have a plan. There are efforts, right, the law that was created on 2019 created a committee to develop a plan that has sort of stalled, and was it kind of faced a lot of difficulties along the way to get where it is at the moment. And so far, also that needs to go through the legislature in order to be in place. And I think if we go back to, the science, right, that talks about anthropogenic emission, that is about human activity, but at the end of the day, what we're talking on climate is people. So it is very, frustrating and saddening that we don't have such a vulnerable nation, doesn't have an actual plan on how to, attack and respond to the challenges that we have at the current moment in Puerto Rico. So we have a mosaic of laws, of regulations, but no coherent strategy. So that also makes it very hard to have a very strong response that will protect the people of Puerto Rico and its communities.
Very good. So I think that gives us a brief overview of sort of the lay of the land, the state of play right now in terms of where the challenges and the vulnerabilities are. And now we want to talk a little bit about the current efforts that are underway and some of the success stories that we're seeing on the ground. And we'll start off with Fernando again to talk to us about the importance of protecting land of high ecological value on the island. So I guess my question to you is, how has Para la Naturaleza built social and political will to tackle this issue, right? To protect more land on the island, and how far along is the island in meeting its goal of preserving 33% of its land by 2033?
Okay. I guess the most important strategy is staying out of politics. No, as I read the word there also, destabilize. I think I should start by saying that we have destabilized not only the use of land, but the use of air and the use of the ocean and waters. So in terms of the land, it's one of our main focus, but really, as Brenda said, protecting the land really protects the quality of water, protects the oceans, and eventually protects the airs as well from because of the carbon sequestration. So they're all entangled. But in terms of the land part, back in the early 2000s, we were just looking at different very pristine and unique ecosystems that we were able to raise funds and to purchase or do conservation easements and protect them. But very early on in the 2000s, we start understanding that we needed to look at the whole island. We couldn't stay only looking at our specific sites. So there we started expanding our view, and we hired a firm that worked for quite a few years, about 6 years, doing a conservation plan for the whole island of Puerto Rico. And when we finished that, maybe around 2010, the major conclusion, obviously, learning the amount of ecosystem that had been lost, is a need to protect 33% of the islands of Puerto Rico. And the scientists were kind of hesitant to pinpoint a number, but we finally get them to pinpoint that number, which is not magical, but it really points in the right direction and with the right amount. And in 2013, we launched the unit Para la Naturaleza, which is an operational unit of the trust. And during that launch, we actually challenged the islands of the government and individuals, communities, and corporations in Puerto Rico to adopt this goal of protecting 33% of the land. That is an important step because that really breaks the anthropocentric view that we have the right to use 100% of the planet. And by saying, okay, there is a limit and we have to respect the rights of other species was an important step. And so we started planning that at that time in 2013. We were not looking at land conservation very at the landscape level, as I mentioned. So we were protecting about 8%, which was among the lowest in the world. So I think by launching the goal, a lot of the government officials and political parties start supporting this. And that has helped a lot. So right now we have achieved 17% of the land is protected, which is pretty much, we have doubled it. But that doesn't mean we have to double it again in less than 10 years. So there's a long way to go. So in terms...
When you say protected, what does that mean? It's designated, it has a certain governmental designation to prevent construction on it?
Not only those, it's what's considered legally protected. So it can be by NGO. It doesn't have to be a designation of a nature reserve or a state forest. It just have to be proven that it's in our case through our bylaws and legal structure, they are considered legally protected. Yeah. So it's
what are some of the some of the examples that you would point out?
Well, we have, in terms of the protected areas, we have over 86 protected areas throughout Puerto Rico. People always tell me, what is your favorite? I cannot answer that. It's like they're all like a kid.
Cañón San Cristóbal.
They're all amazing. Yeah, Cañón de San Cristóbal is the only canyon in the Caribbean, so it has a special feature and protection because of the cliffs have protected a lot of the biodiversity there. But yeah, we have pretty much every single ecosystem of the 25 ecosystems that we have every single ecosystem represented in the network that we are taking care of. We have been doing that, but also, and it's about 40,000 acres, Anamar mentioned, so it's about close to 2% of the island. So out of the 17%, we're protecting 2%. The government, obviously federal and local government, has a lot, but some other NGOs are also managing some lands. But another very important point that we learned very early on in the 70s, we started our educational programs. Because really people at that time, and still some today, they didn't know why nature and why conservation had to exist. And so we started a huge educational program throughout all of our sites. And in this past 40 years, we have received over 2 million people in our educational programming. So hope that has really impacted a lot of the population. And more recently, after the hurricanes, we also expanded that to start working. I mean, we had community-based conservation work before, but really after the hurricanes, our connection with communities and engagement with them really grew. So we're working right now with 33 communities throughout the islands very closely in nature conservation and other interests. So that it really expanded our scope of work dramatically, and also kept expanding into impacting or transforming or supporting agroecology in Puerto Rico, because traditional agriculture has an incredible impact into the landscape and into the health of the ecosystem. So we have been doing a lot of support with over 200 agroecological farmers. So those are the areas that we have been pushing to counteract, all the impacts in nature and have nature work for us and not against us. I mean, nature is also defending itself, it's protecting, it's adapting, and it's doing its best to cope with all these changes. So if we help nature, at the end of the day, we can have nature support us as well.
And in terms of making Puerto Rico more resilient, I think, Bimari, you can talk a little bit about what's happening in Culebra, off the eastern coast of Puerto Rico, and talk to us a little bit about how the efforts there in Culebra can sort of serve as a model, right, to help offset the challenges from rising sea levels and hurricanes.
Yes, of course. I would like to start with answering that question, right? Why Culebra? Well, Culebra is an island at the east side of Puerto Rico. It's a small island. It has really small population. Everyone is kind of family once you've been living there, working there for more than 10 years. So that's really meaningful. Also, its local community is vulnerable to climate change or this natural disaster because they disrupt their schedules. All the basic service get disrupted, starting by electric power. After that, access to clean water is also connected. So you don't have power, you don't have water, you don't have internet. It takes longer also to get the aid you need after a natural disaster, or just small, big, doesn't matter. In August, we have a tropical storm that passed east of Culebra, and they experienced Hurricane 1 winds, and we were 1 week without electricity throughout the archipelago, not only Culebra. So that's how all this is the word I would like to focus, right, or keep repeating is the interconnectivity we have, not only as humans, but also with the biodiversity. And Culebra is basically that, is it's a dry island, so it's also, it gets a lot of sun, is ideal for solar energy and other renewable energy. And it's protection of the air, having clean energy, affordable, also protects the waters, right? The watershed and the coral reefs, they have a high biodiversity representative of the whole Caribbean, and is right there in the middle of all the Caribbean. So everything that grows there in terms of fish, it goes with the currents all the way to Florida, to Cuba, elsewhere. So everything is interconnected. So that's why Culebra, right? That's why with EDF identified Culebra as a strong community. There's local leaders that are willing to make things happen. So that also was important in our decision of doing a project there that could serve as a model. And throughout the development and implementation of a pilot project, right, to provide that resiliencies that the community needed, the most important thing is the community engagement and integration in the design of this kind of project, not just coming top down with a high-tech solution that maybe they don't understand, but going the other way around. Like, first of all, asking what they need, how can we help you, how can we work together to engage them and make the process an educational one, a participatory one. So that solution, in this case, a technological solution, which it's kind of difficult to start talking about solar energy if they had never used it before. It was really important in the process of, even after and during COVID, we have a lot of assistance in the meetings and a lot of engagement, and that's basically what's the key to the results of our project. Basically, this was with private funding from Fundación Colibrí. We're really grateful, and other supporters, and it made us. It opened the opportunity, right, to develop the project with the community and establish the eligibility criteria with them. And we were able to provide solar rooftop and battery storage to 45 families in Culebra. And that was a huge, it's a huge win for them. In this case, this house that is on the left, it has also, they store water. That's not a common practice because they got their water connected underwater the same way as the electricity. So they have lost some of the basic or like traditional way of using the natural resources. So we're also going back to that. Like, you need electricity, if you have a water pump, all gets interconnected. So when a hurricane comes or when the basic services are disrupted, you have the basic things you need. And not only you, if you have a granddaughter, a nephew, that someone else that needs to come to your house, that house can become a hub inside of their own community. And this community is already, it shows a lot of solidarity. So that's also a key component here in our project. So the result, like I mentioned, 45 homes with solar systems and battery, 135 people are directly benefit with this system, but like I mentioned before, a lot of other people will be indirectly benefit if they need just come home and charge a cell phone, something like that. 6% of the full-time residents are represented in this project. And after approval and integration in the net metering program, a lot of these residents got their bill lower only to 4%. So we are experiencing, we have our electric grid that's unreliable, that's very expensive, and we provide resiliencies and lower their bill. So that money, they can either put it in a bank account or in a savings for the future O&M, and that's a conversation we're following up right now. We didn't just finish the project and leave. We're continuing the engagement opportunities and trying to figure out what's next, because these systems have a very long life, and they have to make it work. So when their nephews or their grandkids come and inherit that homes, those systems are there working for them, or they are improved. But they are empowered with this technology because they learn about it right from the very beginning, and now they're owners of that system, and they will decide what to do next. So that's something that's really important. And the last point there is all the lessons learned that this project provided to us and all the other collaborators, right? Just being here and talking to all of you, that's really important because we keep the word, spreading the word, and this help us complete and get an award from the Department of Energy to now provide more solar rooftop and batteries to more than 100 families. So we're right now in the process of working in the implementation in collaboration with 2 local NGOs that are recipients of this grant. So we continue to implement that focus of community engagement. Community is important, and here this just the logos of some of the collaborators, and Anushka is there in the solar celebration. There's a lot of lessons learned, but most important of all is how, like I mentioned before, that interconnectivity is. We can focus in one topic, but that doesn't mean we're not gonna see the other ones or not gonna work with that. We indirectly, everything is interconnected, and that's what's really awesome about this panel, is that even though we have our own focus and our niche, we are working towards the same goal, making Puerto Rico more resilient and making Puerto Rico a better place for current and future generation. This also helps culebrenses stay in their house, because they have peace of mind. They have something less that they have to worry to, because they have a lot of other things: transportation, water, high cost of food, and other service they need to worry. So that was like my main point for today, is for you to take home message is basically that.
And quickly, how scalable do you think a model like that is to other communities on the island? And what do you think is like the biggest hurdle or obstacle standing in the way?
Yeah, that's already happening. There's other communities like in Salinas, Abeinocoop. These communities, they started doing by, they had a neighbor association, and then they understood, okay, now our next big thing is energy, so let's do a cooperative, let's work with this. But the main challenge is the operation and maintenance, because normally funding comes for the very first part of the project. That's pre-design, pre-implementation, installation, everything looks good, but then NGOs, supporters, everyone needs to move on. So the sustainability part, how the community keeps on working with this solution and make it work as it's designed to work, I think that's a challenge. We, as different groups are working in different projects, we continue to share lessons learned and think and talk about how we can do it. But basically, the communities are the one that had to bring the solutions to the table, because they're the one in charge of continuing that process.
And so going to San Juan now, Brenda, could you talk to us a little bit about the San Juan estuary, which is a very important network of lagoons and channels, and very vital ecosystem. What is the San Juan Bay Association doing there around protecting the communities around the estuary from storm surges and pollution, and what have been some of the things that have been going on?
So the San Juan Bay Estuary Partnership has been operating for the past 30 years. And in 2017, and from 1994 to 2017, we've been, monitoring, gathering data, working closely with the municipalities, as I mentioned, with the Department of Natural Resources, with the, do we have the, okay, nice. The Puerto Rico Aqueduct Sewer Authority, the Department of Transportation, all of them are part of the partnership. But we've also even developed a climate change adaptation plan for the San Juan Bay Estuary system, and that was in 2013. But it wasn't until 2017 that everything materialized. all of those partnerships we've made and all of those relations with the community, as Avi-Mari mentioned, we've been working closely with the community leaders and working from a lens of cultural competency. So all of that paid off. In 2017, unfortunately, everything materialized and all of those projections became a reality. We were able to demonstrate what we've been telling you, government leaders, is true. We are living in a very vulnerable region. So after that, we became sort of part of a relief process in the region and decided to transform community centers into resilient hubs, where we had like the water quality labs there, and we were, educating the community on the use of those the water resources and just helping them with everything just to stabilize the whole process. And immediately after that, we secured funding from the State Revolving Fund to then develop a few roadmaps for the entire region to sort of follow a resilience path. And there are a few initiatives that were developed, and so one of them is the Coastal Resilience Capacity Building Project. And that's the one that we currently have for the past 2 years. We've been able to engage around 26,000 people. From many regions and people that are just interested in getting to know how to plant a red mangrove, plant a coastal vegetation, evaluate seagrass beds, evaluate the coral reefs, the situation of the coral reefs. And so we've been doing that in a very systematic way. And certifying those that are able to finish the modules, which are very scientific, but we're calling them those volunteer citizen scientists, and certifying them, and hopefully having them obtain a job in this field of environmental conservation or sustainability or resiliency. So that project is going super, super well. We've been with the support also from the Banco Popular and also other private corporations that have been supporting Estuario in one way or the other. That's a project that it's ongoing, and it's being able. Did you see the aerial view already? Okay, cool. So besides that one, we're also starting a huge and very bold project, and that is the reverse of the channelization of the Juan Mendez Creek. I don't know if you know, but the whole dredging of the Martin Peña Channel, many of you have heard of it, that's the channel that connects the San Jose Lagoon with the San Juan Bay, and it's been clogged for the past 3 decades. Is that right? 3 decades already. Is in a channel that is 3.7 mile long, and we just secured the funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law, thankfully. And so the whole dredging is finally coming to reality. That project was first conceptualized with all the elements of, moving people from one area that is vulnerable to another region, the empowerment of them, developing the water infrastructure, the road infrastructure, the energy infrastructure. Everything was conceptualized. It was part of the San Juan Bay Estuary program management plan. So now that we have that on the way and it's sort of like moving forward, thankfully, we're now moving into a new project. It's this reverse of the channelization of this creek. It was channelized in the 50s by the municipality of San Juan, and and the whole channel has collapsed. Okay, when you go there, it's incredible. It's a stream of raw sewage moving from the University of Puerto Rico, right? It's running parallel from the University of Puerto Rico all the way, and it discharges into the San Jose Lagoon. San Jose Lagoon is where the Teodoro Moscoso, that big bridge that crosses from the airport to the San Juan area to Rio Piedras is. And so all of that discharge is threatening that project of the dredging of the Martin Peña, because if we actually let that raw sewage continue to discharge into the San Jose Lagoon, when we open up that channel, it will then flow and continue to impact the rest of the ecosystem that we've been able to restore. So many challenges ahead. It's a project that I'm doing in collaboration with the Department of Natural Resources, the Municipality of San Juan, the Aqueduct Sewer Authority, but with the community. What Abimari said is very important and very powerful. Without the community, we're not able to sustain the job and to be able to be effective in the long run.
And speaking of communities, Isatis, can you talk to us a little bit about how local communities and traditionally underserved pueblos and barrios in Puerto Rico have begun to mobilize to sort of try to enact change from the ground up post Maria specifically?
Yeah, I think growing up, I grew up in a very small barrio in San Juan that's called Caimito. And from that, like that barrio is very well known for its like environmental justice movement. And I think like growing up as well as many other communities in Puerto Rico, what they have experienced and all of that they have known is solidarity and mutual aid. And I think like that's what we saw like after Maria, right? Like community saves community, and that piece of connection and making sure that, you know, like the people on the ground, you know, they know like, oh, like Doña Juana is there and she doesn't have family, but she has X, Y, and Z kind of diseases, so we need to keep an eye on her. So communities were able to develop different sorts of responses to this based on like their very specific context. So I think like, you know, when we're talking about climate and how to respond, is that, you know, we're talking about systematic transformation. So I guess is what are the different instances and social enterprises that are interconnected with climate? For example, we see the organizations that work with women, and after that, there was a lot of effort in trying to provide, you know, support for making sure that there were maternity milk banks, trying to translate, and then also, you know, like social cafeterias, and then you have other organizations that are working in making sure that we're strengthening our coastal barriers, right? Like planting corals, planting mangroves, and all of that. So all of these together makes like the response of Puerto Rico. So I guess like back in 2016, seeing how different countries have been starting to put together their climate strategies, we started having climate assemblies, just like started like at the end or maybe like the beginning of 2017. But then Maria happened, and then we shifted into supporting the communities in Puerto Rico, you know, that needed, you know, like supplies, etc. And then like we retake the effort, right? To how do we make sure that Puerto Rico has a strategy that responds to, that is created by Puerto Rico and for Puerto Rico. So we started having this process, and then COVID happened, but it's a story of Puerto Rico. It's like one crisis after the other. Why would it be different, right? Like, so we definitely like started having a long line of conversations that materialized after COVID, right? Like we had several in person, then went online, and then last year we finalized them. And the idea of this like citizen assembly is that the agenda is set by people. Like they told us what were the specific topics that they wanted to talk about, and we span across all of the horizons of environment, climate, and society. One thing, like one particular thing that came, it didn't matter, like they set up the agenda, but if we were talking about like cities and we were talking about, you know, sidewalks, every conversation came back to the same point on the importance of participation, transparency, and accountability. Those 3 points stuck out. Like it didn't matter what the conversation was, they all came back, right? So there is this very, very crucial need into how to make sure that communities are integrated into policy. So for that, right, like we're creating this and then expanding some moments for communities to be able, right, like they have the information to respond to this plan that we were speaking before, which by the way had 700 pages. This is very, very hard, like very heavy for people to access it. So we started to like break it down, right? What is inside of each chapter? Like what are kind of the, so by the end, right, like we have both of the vision, right? Like making sure that communities have the opportunity to dream what is the future together that we want for Puerto Rico, but then as well, what are their needs? So from those needs, some of the things that came up was like, it's great that we have at the national level a strategy, but what we need is to make sure that at the level of the community, we have community adaptation plans. So we were able to secure funding to develop those plans and also provide support for intervention. So it's not only like Puerto Rico, like we talk about that we have like a sea of PDFs. Like there's so many documents, but no implementation. So we're like, okay, like we need to make sure that in whatever we propose, we're actually, it's not only that the community, great, like they have this plan and now what? And then like building the institutional capacity of municipalities to understand the worth of those inputs from the community and making sure that they have space into what they're putting forth at the climate response at the local level. So I think that it's just a matter of seeing that. I think that at some point we will say that every job is a climate job, right? Like, so every response, like every community response, is developing the capacities and, trying to, break barriers for communities and reduce the vulnerability. So it's just a matter of having like a coherent way to work together. So like the power of multi-level partnerships is very important for this work.
Very well. So we're moving to the final section now, just pushing it forward and looking at the future. And I'll ask to try to keep the responses brief so we have some time for questions from the audience. And Fernando, the first one is for you. We're less than 2 weeks away from elections in Puerto Rico. The elephant in the room. I'm wondering what you make of how climate change is being discussed in the public discourse on the island right now. Does it feel like there's a sense of urgency by the local government, by elected officials, by the candidates to tackle the issue in a comprehensive manner?
You know, the candidates' platforms. I was looking at them the other day, and I have some notes here that I can tell you a little bit where they're at. But I just wanted to start saying that I have never seen a Puerto Rico government or governor or government report back on what they've done with what they say they were going to do. So I don't know how much of this will really, and you mentioned implementation. I don't know how much of this will happen, but I think they all the parties that I checked the platform, they all covered to different degrees. The Partido Nuevo Progresista, and I want to be equally unfair with all of them. Partido Nuevo Progresista was talking about reservas de agua, which I don't really understand much, but it sounds, the bonos de carbón, which I think they mean credit, carbon credits, and they are talking about green energy, but on the ocean type of green energy. La Alianza is the only one that brings up and commits to the 33% of the land protection. So that's the only party that has that, and it touches the issue of justicia ambiental, environmental justice. And both the Alianza and the Partido Popular talks about reforestation. The Partido Popular commits to the Ley de Mitigación, which we have here, former President of the Senate, that proposed and made that law a reality. So that is a commitment to the 100% renewable energy by 2050. And they talked about reforestation and defending the land use plan, which is important. Both the Alianza and the PPD talked about the defending the land use plan. But as I say, I still, I mean, it's getting traction, but I still feel that this is still in the not in the must-have bucket, but in the just a nice-to-have bucket. So we really have to keep pressing on that front to make these documents a reality. So as we've talked, the resiliency factor, I mean, having to invest a lot of money to redo our infrastructure and even worse, to manage the damages of what's going on. It's really becoming extremely costly, and I think at this rate, we have to start thinking how this will affect our economies and our welfare, the welfare of our lives. So it's quite scary, and we need to keep investing. We need to keep managing the human footprint through energy, through reduced contamination. Eliminate the garbage problem and the plastic problems and all those human-created damages. It's certainly really important. But we have to go also to the root of the problem. We have really destabilized our ecosystem, and they're out of control, and they're suffering, and we are suffering because of that. So we have to go back and protect nature. We have to protect the 30 by 30 goal. I mean, and I say 30 by 30, I forgot to mention that in 2022, at COP, I think it was Montreal, the world started to commit to protect 30% of the planet by 2030. And that is a very important shift, again, because of the same arguments that we did it in 2013, but now about 197 countries have committed to protect 30 by 30 of the planet. So this is a game changer. It's also a 30 by 30 commitment on restoring 30% of our degraded ecosystem. So there are big commitments out there towards this, but this is a very important step that we need to make to reverse or at least reduce what's happening right now. I just want to conclude by saying, I mean, I think most people here that were in Puerto Rico in 2017 lived 3 months without power. If you were in the mountains, 9 months without power. So, I mean, the question that we have to face, I mean, New York has to face, is New York ready to be 3 months without power, 9 months without power? I thought so. I think we know what that means in terms of the suffering, and the most vulnerable people suffer even more, and the economic losses that brings. So I think we have to go deep down and find what really is going to make us make big changes, make big decisions. And it all departs from our values and our ethical standards and our ethical guidelines. And I think we have to start working on changing our relationship with nature, changing the legal framework to protect nature. And we're working on a movement called the Rights of Nature right now, because we need to set a different platform and a different way of operating. And to do that is just not to, to put Band-Aids here and be more sustainable there. I mean, we have to do that. But the big changes need to have changes in our values and in our education system. And I'm looking here at two chancellors here that they know what I mean. It is the basis of change, and that's what I think we're striving for.
And in the absence of any big changes in the immediate future, right, as of now, Abimari, I'm wondering, what are sort of the ways in which organizations in Puerto Rico, mainland organizations here in the U.S., and other allies can work together to sort of fill some of those gaps?
Yeah, I can following up on the last question. There's Act 17 you mentioned. It has really aggressive goals in terms of transforming Puerto Rico and achieving 100% of renewable energy by 2050. We're far out from that, but we could start there. There has been a multi-sectoral effort to come up with a study, PR100, Puerto Rico 100, that was done in collaboration with the federal government, local government, institutions, academia, NGOs, communities, and it really brings out the key conclusion that we could do that if the investment is led by the community, right? And a colleague of mine used to say, Braulio, we need to give power back to the people. I know that's a phrase that's common also. And I think that's true, right? Like if we know that things as they are not working, then let's, give something back to the community so they can bring their own solution. And that's why decentralized solar energy systems and batteries is a key solution that can be promoted. So that's in general terms, right? We could keep on talking about Culebra. That's a really good model, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. And also talking about the organization, EDFs is a international NGO. It has presence not only in Puerto Rico, in US, in China, India, Europe. And our project, our team is also providing lessons to how EDF works, and also their community engagement team is building relationship and partnership with other NGOs and communities around the world that suffer environmental injustice, right? And that's the way of giving voice to these people that they have a voice, but maybe they don't have the means or the ways of telling their story and saying what they need, what they want, how the change and transformation can happen in a way that benefits everyone. And we can adapt to climate change, protect the natural ecosystem that are still healthy, and restores the ones that are already degraded. We're suffering a huge crisis. Coral reefs are bleaching. We're losing that natural infrastructure. That's our main protection from storm surge, sea level rises. So there's a lot that can be done. And most of all, each of us as individuals, as just inhabitants of the planet, doing our own very small steps in our homes, also protecting and supporting these initiatives that we feel they have an impact on people that maybe do not have the resources to do it by themselves, and coming together. coming together, provide resource knowledge, sharing that knowledge, not just keeping to ourselves. There's a lot of experts, I'm pretty sure, in the room, as I heard. So yeah, open up those channels of communication and collaboration. That's really important for us to have a healthier planet.
And in terms of going back to local communities and communities in Puerto Rico, Isatis, what do you think are the tools that are missing or that local communities in Puerto Rico need to continue to organize?
Yeah, I think that communities know how to organize. They just need to be enabled, right? Like I think that in Puerto Rico, and when we're talking about what is needed, is that enabling environment to stay. Like one thing, and I think that this connects us to more to our islander, I guess, counterparts, that the way that we relate to the land is kind of different of like people that live in the continent. There is like more, bandwidth of like where you can go even in disasters, these situations. But the way that we relate is like, this is like 100 by 35, right? Like that's what we have. And then we have our archipiélago, right? Like, so this is the land. There is no more. But people are connected in ways that, home is this land, right? Like, so people want to stay and they need to have the enabling environment to be able to do so. And what that means is, like talking about like this power shift and making sure that people have the ability to influence and also like transform how we do governance, and ensure that that is taken into consideration when we are like developing our policies, and that is taken into consideration before, not like after the fact, or just trying to check a box and it's like, okay, we did like some town halls, etc. No, like making sure that we're co-designing with the community, both as like government, but also as NGOs, right? Like there is a lot of NGOs that come into communities and maybe with very good intent, but so often we see that there is pushback from the community, and that often is rooted in the mistrust of like these entities that might not know their context and just come in and think like, oh, I have the solution for you, right? Like, so I think that we really need to think about how all of that works with the community, and very importantly, like the access to resources, right? Like I think that money is a very hard topic, but if something is not in a line budget, it doesn't exist. Like there is no way to sustain it. There is no way to really provide it the continuity that it needs. So I think that we need to think about like, how do we simplify the access so that the communities themselves can access those and like help themselves, right? Like we don't need to come in and be like the saviors of the community. Communities have power and they have the solutions that actually work for their context. And it's how do we mobilize the resources that we have, whether it's like grant writers, that is some of the work that we do in Columbia University, like grant writers for community, or like how do we mobilize technical expertise? How do we mobilize the specific needs that communities are telling us? That it's like, I need X, Y, and Z, and we reach into our different networks, and how can we make that happen? And in that, I think like it's not only at the level of the island, but I think that there is a lot of opportunity in connecting and looking at maybe to the sides rather than the north, because there's so many good, I guess, strategies that really we can learn a lot from other islands from Latin America that are more adaptable to our context than maybe looking at more looking at countries with that are richer or have a very vast amount of land. So I think like participation, making sure that there is access, and finally interconnection, both in the different levels of the island, but also abroad to some of our similar counterparts.
Very good. And then to finish off, Brenda, I'm wondering you've been working on a very particular ecosystem in the San Juan Bay. And I'm wondering what are the best lessons and strategies from your experience working there that you think could be replicated elsewhere on the island for other types of conservation efforts?
Yes, from the institutional point of view, our entity as a nonprofit organization, we've been we decided to be bold, to be based our boldness on scientific data. So I think that's very important for this crisis we're living, is to really pay attention to what scientists are saying, and to never stop evaluating the system that you're trying to improve, to restore, to make it stronger, less vulnerable. Just get to know, be mindful of what you're doing. Just make sure, don't be scared of data. Embrace it, look. And also, the other thing we do is we translate that data into public information, just to make sure that we, touch those points that Isati was also trying to present, just to make sure that the community also understand, provides input, and then therefore we're managing, the complete set of data, right? Not only what the water quality is saying, which is priority, but also what the community is saying, and then from there you put together a full picture. Our entity has been doing that, and I think that's been very, very powerful. We've been also trying to raise the red flag to those 44 municipalities that are in these coastal regions. The 60% of the population that you mentioned earlier. Also trying to talk with the rest of the municipalities that are not in the coastal regions, to just make sure that they understand the implications of their poor land use decisions, and trying to support. Also, another thing that we do a lot is collaboration, to understand that we work and our focus is water quality, but we have these strong leaders and entities that are working with this other set of areas of expertise that we need to really come together and work. I can mention many other strategies that we put in place, but important that the San Juan Bay Estuary Partnership is a national estuary program, the only one outside of the continental US and within tropical waters, that makes us a case study. So every time we go to the Congress, every time we go to the states, we communicate what we're doing, we communicate the state of emergency we currently are, we communicate the fact that $3 billion are still not invested in mitigation as they said that they would. We communicate, right after the Maria hit us, the importance of getting those $90 billion that we received. But now we cannot rest. We have to continue to be active from each of our platforms. So that's why I'm actually very, very happy to be here, to be back with my diaspora. I was part of the diaspora for many years, and I enjoyed it. I embraced the culture here outside of Puerto Rico, but I also wanted to go back so badly, and I'm glad I'm there, but also glad that you're here, that you care about our island. And I know that, from your seats, you can do a lot and continue to support us. And thank you so much. Ready.
So I think we're gonna take some questions now, maybe.
So I know it is already 7:45. Thank you so much to our panel. I know we're standing also in between some food, some rum, and some wine, and you know, questions. So I'm just going to go ahead and allow all of you to make all of your questions during the reception, except for one person, because I have here Ramon Cruz, who is the former board president of the Sierra Club. And I'm going to allow Ramon to make the one question for all of you. And then all of you can ask questions during the reception. So Ramon, you know, no pressure, no pressure.
That's a lot of pressure, but thanks for the opportunity, and let me commend you, Fernando, as well, for a great panel of very high quality of such an important topic. Well, I cannot speak for everybody, but I want to maybe put a few topics, and then in the reception we can you can go deeper on that, because one, I guess, a very general one is I think maybe all of you alluded to things outside Puerto Rico. The diaspora, the national estuary programs in the UN, and how often Puerto Rico, maybe because it's it's an island, looking so much internally, but how we can use those networks. You started with the Caribbean at the beginning. We should really exploit those relationships that are able to speak on behalf of us, because often, when we're in the UN, in the Paris Agreement process, you cannot really, the US doesn't really represent the reality of Puerto Rico, but many of our neighbors do. The other topic that I would like to go deeper, Mari, you mentioned Act 17, as well as the PR 100. I just came from DOE. The secretary speaks, the U.S. Department of Energy Secretary Granholm speaks very highly of Puerto Rico, and it's on her mind all the time. However, as you mentioned, there's no implementation. So I was wondering if perhaps you could expand on the LNG terminal that we have in Puerto Rico, because we have this great goal of 100% renewable energy. However, we're not nearly like Hawaii, for example, that it's already on that track with like a third of the island. But in Puerto Rico, it's really behind, and then it's contradictory that we're building an LNG terminal, liquefied natural gas, for Puerto Rico, in the middle of one of the most dense places, in the Caribbean. So I was wondering, what the impact of that will be, and also if it's possible to have 100% renewable, if that's the strategy that at least the current government is pushing. Sorry if I took too long.
No, and that would be 30 seconds for, go ahead. Who wants to take part of the question here?
Just on the networking and relationship, it's crucial. I mean, every time we are able to meet with counterparts, either here in the U.S. or in the Caribbean, either Mesoamerica, the trust and the friendship and relationship that builds up opens huge amount of doors. So that's for us, that's critical. And you mentioned trust. I think that's a basis of a lot of this, the effectiveness of these relationships. In terms of energy, I'm going to just say that every single dollar we put in keeping fossil fuel, it's pushing us back in terms of achieving that. So I know I'm not a technical expert. I know you have to maintain the system running, but that should be kept at a minimum, because I think every single dollar that we can push should be moving into renewable, and preferably not through solar farms, but using existing structures and impacted areas to do that. And I think it can be done. There's a study of UPR West that validates a lot of the end numbers, but obviously there is a lot of transition that needs to take place.
I would just like to add, using that last question about opportunities, like how can we come together as NGO, as individuals, as expert, and put ourselves out there and also make a change, right? In future planning scenarios, like integrated research plan is due to, the process should start next year, and it has a component of community and NGOs participation. So how can we all come together, do a coalition as it was done in the previous version of the IRP, which was successful because a lot of what it was included there was because of those coalition of NGOs, and it was key for us doing this project and for a lot of other people integrating solar in their houses. So we could maybe tackle that there. And thanks for bringing that up. That's really important.
I can add. I think that the question is no, we cannot reach 100 renewable without that ports. That's short answer. And in terms of like the UN, I think that basically, you know, I think it's about showing up, right? I think that I have been going to the UN a long time, and I always try to bring like delegation of like Puerto Rican people, and it's very important. Like every time that we make like an intervention, we mention that Puerto Rico and trying to elevate, and both like through making those connections, you know, like through the Citizen Assembly, we also connected with Dominican Republic, Chile, and other countries to help them like see the different members of the assembly, like how they were making it. So I think like from our own respective networks, we can bring like that visibility up, and even like in some very contentious discussions, they actually welcome the perspective of Puerto Rico by being even like within the U.S. Our like I guess like our friends in like the global South, they like that there is also like an accountability from within. So yeah. Thank you.
I feel I have to say something.
You have to.
I'm gonna have to say something. I like this question, and I've been thinking about what would be a good answer, right? Because we feel like como que un poco frustrated about this whole situation, and I think that's a good homework for each of us to take. How is it that, you know, how can we make sure that something like that does not go unnoticed? In my case, I'm also a member of the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council, which advises the EPA administrator on environmental justice issues. And that was actually presented before the administrator as an environmental justice issue. It poses a risk to the communities, the adjacent communities, that we're not just talking about the neighbors next to those plants. If anything happens, we're talking about the old San Juan, and also like the Guaynabo ports and the Cantaño ports. And so those are the risks that we have to consider and think that this is an alarming decision, and it's really not only pushing us back in that goal that we have of bringing renewable energy, but also it's a security issue. So thank you, Ramon.
All right, and with that, Isatis mentioned showing up. We want to thank all of you for showing up. That's a huge first step. I'm going to channel Carmen and say, what can you do? Threes, right? Threes. So 3 things. Energize, educate, get educated, get energized, and engage. Please engage, and thank you so much. There's some rum, there's some wine, a lot of more conversation. Thank you, Luis, Brenda, Fernando, Isatis, Abimari. Thank you.